The Ohio Redistricting Commission unanimously passes a brand new congressional map that will last for the remainder of the decade. And that is under Article 19 that was passed by 75% of the voters back in 2018. We're joined by State Senator Jane Timken, Republican from Canton, Ohio, who served both on the Legislative Committee for Redistricting and on the Ohio Redistricting Commission. And hey, look at that. That process passed by the voters worked.
Well, it did. I think the best thing that we all can say is that we will have maps until 2031. And so people will have, they will know what their congressional district looks like. This is a very arduous process. We heard lots of testimony from some very interested parties. But at the end of the day, I am pleased with how this ended up. I think there's a high possibility that Republicans can pick up 2 extra seats. And with the commission voting unanimously for this map, it means that these maps will be in effect till 2031, but the risk of going to a majority vote in the legislature was that we would be subject to a referendum, which would then mean as soon as they collected enough ballot signatures, we would be back to the 510 map, which would mean that we would not pick up seats for 2026, which, as we know, is incredibly important because the Democrats around the country, states like California, are redrawing their maps because they want control of Congress. And my message to folks is they did it before, they'll do it again. Democrats are going to try to impeach President Trump, who is doing an incredible job for the American people.
And one of the important things, because there is the narrative on the national level and the political pressure from all sides, and then the narrative from the local legacy media, but we work within the law, the constitutional amendment, Article 19, to draw the new maps as agreed to in a unanimous fashion by the Redistricting Commission.
Absolutely, and these maps are constitutionally compliant, and they were passed unanimously as required by the commission. And unlike other states, the state of Ohio was required to redraw our districts in our maps because back in 2021, our maps were not passed on a bipartisan basis, so they were only in effect until this time. And so we have the voters of Ohio will have consistency for the next several years, and they will be able to know what their district looks like.
Not only is that good for the registered voters of Ohio, but it's also good for the political process and serving the people, so you know exactly what your district is if you're a United States congressman, or under the Article 19, which is the legislative district process, a little bit different than Article 19. But there is a solid understanding of these are my district lines. I know exactly what the neighborhoods and communities are, and that allows your congressional representative, your congressman or woman, to serve you better. And you were talking a little bit about how this is a 3-part process, Article 19. It starts with the General Assembly, and if that starts in September, and if there is not a vote in September, it goes to the Redistricting Commission, which just passed with the unanimous vote the new congressional map. But had it not been passed at the end of October, and as we're recording this interview, it is October 31st, it would have gone back to the General Assembly, where a simple majority vote could have passed a map without the required bipartisan support, and that would have opened up the potential, as you said, for a referendum, which almost assuredly would have happened from the far left special interest groups, the NDRC, the National Democratic Redistricting Commission, that would have been able to, during a 90-day window, to maybe gather enough petition signatures that would have then, by law, delayed that map until 2028.
Correct. And that referendum would have been on the ballot in 2026, which is an off-year election and a non-presidential election. So there was some, there was some, real concerns about the chaos and turmoil it would cause in the state of Ohio. We tend to be saddled with so many ballot initiatives, quite frankly, driven by the Democrat Party because they can't control the state of Ohio, so they're trying to do this through the ballot and initiatives, and they would yet again try to do this. And we could see if they had gotten their way, it would have been far worse for Republicans.
Well, look what happened this time last year, right? There was, as we called it, the political outcomes over people campaign, but that was a $40 million dark money funded campaign, mainly out of state money coming in, and the voters identified it and soundly rejected it by 8 points. But that is the threat of the revolving door attacking the Constitution.
Correct.
Just because you don't like your district lines necessarily doesn't mean that the map is gerrymandered, a term that is thrown around all the time for people that don't like their congressman, they don't like their representative, and then, the special interest groups get involved and say it's gerrymandered. But just because you don't like your district or your congressman doesn't mean it's gerrymandered.
Right, and correct. We have to deal with the realities of the political realities in the state of Ohio. There are large swaths of the state of Ohio which are wholly almost 80% Republican. Likewise, there are cities in the state of Ohio that are 70% Democrat. You are never going to be able to draw a Republican district that encompasses the majority of Cuyahoga County or the majority of Franklin County. And so, I hear this rhetoric that we need fair maps, and what I say is fair to whom, right? There's probably the most number of Republican voters are in the largest populous counties, which are blue counties. And is it fair to them that we have counties that have the largest number of Republican voters and they're represented by Democrats? Or is it the same argument? It's fair to whom?
Yeah, fair is a nebulous concept. That's why you follow the guidelines as outlined under Article 19 in the Constitution. What is your message regarding, and one last point on that, because of the demographic makeup of Ohio, as you explained, large swaths of Republicans living in some of the more rural areas, and then more of the Democrat registered voters living in the municipalities. That's just called geography and not gerrymandering.
Correct. And that's the reality of the state of Ohio. And as we all know, Ohio is trended more red. When Ted Strickland was a congressman, Southern Ohio was deep blue. It is no longer. It is ruby red. And so there has been a shift, a political shift, but we also have seen that, a divide between rural and urban. And that is continued to trend across not only Ohio, but the country.
You hear some of the special interest groups, especially from the left, and then the original map that was introduced by the Democrats was a so-called 8-7 map, which sort of sounded like this is a reliably 8-7 map. We've gerrymandered an 8-7 map is kind of how it sounded to me. But one of the interesting things about that special interest far left is, well, why don't we just then make all of the congressional districts in Ohio at-large seats and let all of the people then vote on those congressional districts? They wouldn't like that, would they?
No, because as we've seen in the last 10 years, the state of Ohio has consistently turned red. And I make the argument that we've had, including judicial races, 22 statewide races, and Democrats have won one. And so, we need to the Democrats really need to understand the position that where the voters are in the state of Ohio.
Well, their narrative has consistently been since 2020 to let the people pick the politicians and not the other way around. But if that was the case and they were all at-large seats, we pretty much understand. You would probably have 15 Republican congressional seats in the state of Ohio.
Very likely, very likely. And so look, this is an arduous process. It is, it can be very heated, but at the end of the day, I think we have maps that allow for consistency in terms of people will know and clarity where their congressional districts are. We will be able to have candidates who can fill out their petitions and file to be able to be on the ballot in 2026. If we had not done that, we would have a lot of turmoil in the state of Ohio. And again, it's likely that Republicans have potentially picked up 2 good seats. You know, the thing is, there can be waves one way or the other. And, you know, I think that we have to, at the end of the day, have good, strong candidates.
Good, strong candidates, strong fundraising, and really good ideas about what the issues are. Candidates, you have to have support the fundraising, of course, and you have to be right on the issues.
Right, and you need to be able to understand your community and the needs of your community. And so they have to be out there and relate.
Yeah, one of the final thoughts, and since we talk about, you know, the left, and then if you go way, way to the right, it seems like there's a narrative on the national level about, well, what they're doing in California or what's happening in these other states. But in Ohio, again, you have to follow the law as passed by 75% of the voters, Article 19, that was passed in 2018. And it was very clear that regardless of what is happening, whatever the narrative is, whatever the strategy is on the national level, the Ohio Redistricting Commission and the General Assembly under Article 19 follow the law.
Right.
As specified in the Constitution.
Yes, and we followed the parameters of the Ohio Constitution.
State Senator Jane Timken, Republican from Canton, Ohio, member of the Ohio Redistricting Commission. Congratulations on all the hard work. A unanimous map passed by the commission that will last through the remainder of the decade, all the way until, hard to believe, but 2031. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.